Hi guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're talking about sentence types. We're going to go over 4 types of sentences: simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. And at the very end, we'll have a very short practice so that we can review what we go over today. Before we go over the sentence types, we should review some very important terms. As long as you understand these terms, the rest of the lesson should be very easy. So the terms we're going to review very quickly right now are clause, dependent clause, subordinating conjunction, and independent clause. Let's talk about the main word clause. So a clause always needs a subject and a verb. So that is the definition of a clause, subject and verb. We have 2 types of clauses, dependent and independent. So if you look up the word dependent in the dictionary, it means that it relies on something else or somebody else. It can't stand by itself, right? That's what dependent means. So similarly, dependent clause is going to be a clause, but it cannot be a full, complete sentence on its own. For example, when she came home. Here's my subject, here's my verb. So it's a clause, but it's not a complete sentence. If I tell you, hey, when she came home, and then I stop talking, the listener will be confused. Like, what is the point of what I just said, right? What happened when she came home? So this kind of clause, where it does have a subject and a verb, but it's not a complete thought, we call this a dependent clause. It's dependent because it needs something else to finish the thought, right? It's dependent on something else. On the other hand, independent clause means that by itself, it could stand on its own. So by itself, it's a complete sentence. For example, she came home. Period. Here's my subject, here's my verb, right? But even though it's very similar to the dependent clause, this is an independent clause. By itself, it's a complete thought. So I hope that makes sense. Understanding what a dependent clause and an independent clause is very important for this lesson. When you use a dependent clause, you're also going to always use a subordinating conjunction. Subordinating conjunctions are words like this. This is definitely not the full list, but these are some very commonly used subordinating conjunctions. For example, after it stopped raining, right? Although it's still raining, because it's raining so hard, etc., right? So all of your dependent clauses will begin with a subordinating conjunction. Now, finally, let's talk about the 4 sentence types. Let's begin with simple sentence. Simple sentence just means that we're going to have one independent clause in our sentence. For example, I love to jog, right? Here's my subject, here's my verb. There's only one set of subject-verb, which means there's only one clause, right? One independent clause. That is the definition of simple sentence. It just means that there's only one independent clause. A compound sentence needs 2 independent clauses. So for example, I go to school, boop, and I work full-time. Oh, I'm sorry about my writing. So I go, subject verb. I go to school is an independent clause, and I work full-time is another independent clause. So we have 2 independent clauses within one sentence. We call that a compound sentence. And you're always going to use a comma and words like and, or, so, but. In between the 2 independent clauses, you will always, so this is very important, you will always use a comma. Please don't forget this comma. Comma and the word and, etc., right? But, so, nor. Two independent clauses make a compound sentence. So like I said, we use words like and or so or but between the two independent clauses in a compound sentence. So those words are called coordinating conjunctions, and we have 7 of them in English. An easy way to remember the 7 is these red letters right here. It spells fanboys. I don't know what that means, but fanboys, right? That's a good acronym to remember. So you can remember the 7 coordinating conjunctions in English. So they are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So in a compound sentence, again, please use one of these words, and please put a comma before this word. Before we move on, I have a trick question for you. What sentence type do you think this is? Is this a simple sentence or a compound? I like to jog and swim every morning. What do you guys think? I like to jog and swim every morning. Here I have my subject verb, I like to jog. This is actually an independent clause, right? I like to jog is a full sentence by itself. And swim every morning, it's actually nothing. It's not a clause at all. Because the definition of a clause means that I need a subject and a verb. If you look at this little phrase right here, there's no subject, meaning it's not a clause. So by definition, it's a simple sentence because a simple sentence only has one independent clause. And this sentence right here has only one independent clause. However, if my sentence read, I like to jog, comma, and I like to swim. Ooh. I like to jog is an independent clause, and I like to swim is a separate independent clause. In this situation, it would be a compound sentence because there are 2 independent clauses. However, in this original example, there's only one independent clause, so it's actually a simple sentence. Now let's talk about complex sentence. If you look up the word complex in the dictionary, complex means it's not easy, it's not simple, it's complicated, right? So we're going to mix it up. Complex sentence here means we are going to mix one independent clause and one dependent clause. Okay, so that's the definition. For example, I didn't go to school because I was sick. Boop. I didn't go to school. This part is the independent clause, right? It could stand by itself. I didn't go to school because I was sick. This part is the dependent clause, right? Here's my subject, I, was is my verb. So it's a clause, but because I was sick, it's not an independent clause. So again, a complex sentence will always have an independent clause and a dependent clause. Now, it doesn't matter if the independent clause comes in the beginning of the sentence or at the end of the sentence. So if I wanted to, I can just flip this around and say, because I was sick, I didn't go to school. And it's the same thing if I say, I didn't go to school because I was sick, right? So in a complex sentence, you're going to have one independent clause and one dependent clause, and it doesn't matter which one comes first. Now, I just said that it doesn't matter if the dependent or independent clause comes first in the sentence, but there are different rules for each situation. So the rule is, if the dependent clause is in the front of the sentence, you must use a comma. Or, if the dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, you should not use a comma. All right, let me give you an example. When I woke up, just kidding. When I wake up, I always drink water. So in this sentence, my dependent clause came at the beginning of the sentence. When I wake up is a dependent clause. In this situation, it says use a comma. So you must use a comma there. When I wake up, comma, I always drink water. However, if the dependent clause comes later in the sentence, for example, like right here, I always drink water when I wake up. When the dependent clause comes at the end, you should not use a comma. So please remember this rule for the complex sentence. So the fourth and the last type of sentence is compound complex sentence. So as the name suggests, we're going to combine everything. Compound means what? Two independent clauses, right? So here it is. And complex means that we're going to just mix it up with a dependent clause. So a compound complex sentence is going to have at least one dependent clause and two independent clauses. For example, when I'm sick, I go to the doctor, comma, and I sleep 4 days. Boop. When I'm sick is my dependent clause. And then we're going to have two independent clauses. I go to the doctor and I sleep for days. Both of these are independent clauses. So again, compound complex is just going to mix it all together. One dependent and two independent clauses. I know that was a lot to take in, but let's try this very short exercise. Please label each sentence simple, compound, complex, or compound complex. And please pause this video for more time. All right, let's go over the answers. Number 1 says, I'll call you if I finish early. I'll call you, independent. If I finish early, dependent. So one independent, one dependent is complex, right? It's mixed. Number 2 says, I woke up early but fell back asleep. This is really tricky. I'm sorry, this is another trick question. The answer is actually simple. In my classes, this is so mean and I apologize, but a lot of my students get tricked and they put compound sentence because they see the coordinating conjunctions or conjunction and they see two verbs, right? But the definition of a compound sentence is that we need two independent clauses. There's only one independent clause here. I woke up early is an independent clause. Fell back asleep is not anything, right? It has no subject, right? Which means it's not a clause. Therefore, number 2 is simple sentence because there's only one independent clause. Number 3, when you called, dependent clause. He was sleeping, independent clause. He didn't hear his phone, independent clause. So one dependent and two independent clauses, it's compound complex. It says comp. Number 4, I want to go with you, but I have to go to work. I want to go with you, independent clause, comma, but I have to go to work, independent clause. So two independent clauses equals compound sentence. Number 5, I have a parking permit even though there's never any parking space. I have a parking permit, independent clause, even though till the end it's a dependent clause. So one independent, one dependent, complex. Last one, if you need assistance, dependent. You can call our customer care center, independent, or, you can visit our office. So it's dependent and then independent, independent, which means it's a compound complex sentence. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found that helpful, and if you did, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. And please leave a comment or any questions you have below, and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. I'll see you guys next time.